It is that time. It is Wednesday night. It is Why Libertarian time. 7 p.m. on the East Coast. I am Matt. Coming at you every. There's going to be a little bit of announcement. Have been coming at you every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Tomorrow night we're going to kind of like change and morph a little bit more here. So I got another announcement that's coming at you tomorrow night, but. So you are getting notified when those announcements happen and when I'm live and when all the other stuff comes out, because I like tweet and post my face off because I'm a crazy person like that. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, get this out here. If you end up watching me or following my content online on the blockchain, definitely upvote me, please. I would appreciate it, and follow me there as well. In fact, I will run the link tree right here, right there, at the bottom of the screen. The link tree for Why Libertarian will take you to all of the different outlets that I am on. In fact, I'm going to pull it up right now because there is just a ridiculous number of outlets that I'm pushing content to, and the number seems to grow every single day that I am putting stuff together. So this is the link tree for all of the outlets that I'm on currently. You'll see a mix of standard Web 2.0 outlets as well as a bunch of Web 3.0, whether it be DBuzz or Odyssey or 3Speak. Huge news, in a couple of weeks I'm going to have one of the higher ups over at Library going to come on and talk about some of the SEC crap that they're going through, as well as, just the world of blockchain video and kind of competing with Web 2.0 as far as that goes. We already had the dudes on from 3Speak, and they talked to us about, kind of the same thing that's going on and what they're going through in terms of developing, video content portals on the blockchain. So you can hit me up on all those places. A new one is down here at the bottom, Oriel. I'm actually going to have the developer of Oriel on, I believe it's next Tuesday. And this is a blockchain podcasting platform. So my main home base for podcasting is Anchor. That pushes it out to all of the standard podcasting platforms that are out there that you might listen on. There is now blockchain apps that are podcast listening and hosting apps that are out there. Oriel is one of them, and I am newly listed on there. And if I throw this open, I actually have to switch over to the other tab here so you can see what it looks like. But it is pretty cool, dude. Like, it automatically pulls from my Anchor feed, which is fantastic. If you notice on the right-hand side, I've already published 2 podcasts, and they're already starting to get upvotes. And yes, that is crypto that they are essentially amassing as a result of people listening and upvoting that content. So remember, on the blockchain, your content actually gets rewarded almost immediately when people interact with it, and especially if they like it and they upvote it. So that is something to also look at, and a perfect reason to head on over to Hive if you're a podcast listener, to start an account there and listen to my stuff up on the Hive, up on Oriel, that is on the Hive blockchain. So some other things that are happening tomorrow night, I'm going to be talking about, dude, there's so much, there's so much that people are putting into, politics and activism, and, what are the answers? And even amongst my kind of peer group here in New Jersey and that I'm connected to virtually, the questions are always like, okay, how do we affect change? Do we go big? Do we go small? Is it incrementalism? Is it just straight out, civil disobedience and defiance? Where do we get there from, or how do we get there? For me, it's community, and what's happening here in New Jersey is complete evidence of that fact. It is building community, and specifically community that is founded on liberty, and we're going to be doing tons of that in the future. And one of those things that we're working on, a project I will discuss tomorrow. I've kind of mentioned it a little bit in the past, but I haven't really talked about it in depth. And so we are going through the starting phases of creating something that we think can be freaking epic, right? Like, in terms of changing culture. If anything, the left and progressives have taught all of us that culture is, upstream from politics. Like the laws and stuff like that, those are an afterthought. If you change culture first, you can essentially dictate how the politics moves and morphs afterward. So we're going to talk about some of that tomorrow night as well. So, and then the last thing, I do have a little drinky poo on my hands this evening, but we are in the middle of a weight loss and health challenge here in New Jersey in conjunction with Blue Star Union and a ton of the other folks here in the Liberty Movement here in New Jersey. And we are getting fit. We're shedding the weight that we gained during COVID and all of the BS that we had to deal with during the pandemic and the lockdowns and things like that. And we are getting healthy because you can't fight for liberty, or you can fight for liberty, but you are hampered if you are overweight, unhealthy, dependent on basically, medication or, again, we're not talking about, genetic type stuff, but, if it is a self-inflicted wound, so to speak, we are here to try and fix that for ourselves and to be example of folks that are living a life of liberty, not just in terms of what we say, but also what we're doing. Advocacy, nonprofit work, just the whole nine, right? So it is a culture that we are building. I will speak more about that tomorrow. And then Friday night, tune in because I have Greg Mealy, who is running for governor here in the state of New Jersey. That should be a fantastic interview and get to know this governor candidate who is running this year. New Jersey is a really weird state. This year is a gubernatorial election, and so definitely check that out and get to know Greg a little bit more. So, what are we talking about tonight? Centralized public education is dead. It just doesn't know it yet. It is a dinosaur. I'm not going to call it an industry. It is a dinosaur, I guess, aspect of our civilization or institution within our civilization, and it has already been replaced. It just doesn't know it yet. It has been replaced. I'm going to go through the reasons. I'm going to go through the alternatives that are out there. Everyone who says, like, I'm a big proponent of making radical change in the educational system. And a lot of folks say, whoa, hold on, make some incremental changes and some practical things that we can actually do. Look, when certain technologies become outmoded, they go downhill really quickly. We're at that place with centralized public education. Just centralized education, period. We are at that place. But specifically within the public realm. Part of the reason why it sticks around is probably three things. Nostalgia, okay? It is, that's, no one knows anything different, right? So like the parents of today most of them went through a traditional centralized public education system. And so they expect that that's what my kids will do, right? And then the third thing, or the third thing is essentially teachers unions. Teachers unions have a entrenched, vested interest in public education sticking around, and they are extremely powerful still, especially in New Jersey. New Jersey, I think, has the most powerful, or maybe the second most powerful, teachers union of any of the states. And the teachers have obviously a financial interest, and specifically the folks that are higher up in the teachers union have a financial interest in centralized public education sticking around for the long haul. So they are going to fight tooth and nail and try and cut everyone off at the pass. The difference is that, technology and decentralized innovation and entrepreneurship could give less than a crap about the vestiges of the past, okay? They could give less than a crap about the politics of individuals that are wrapped up in these old legacy institutions, okay? And so that's kind of why I'm saying that, this is a dead man walking. It's actually been dead for a while, just no one has figured it out just yet. Let's talk about part of the reasons why things are lining up for, kind of the rapid descent here, if it's not already happening now, right? The first of which has just been over a long period of time, it's been eroding confidence, Okay, there's been eroding confidence in the public education system, whether it be public sentiment, whether it be bad press that comes out, whether it be certain actions on the part of the teachers union to protect teachers that do unconscionable things, such as, think of their classroom less as children who are in their charge to teach and more of a dating pool. Um, Something is continually coming out in the press is those kind of like just unconscionable, immoral things that are done, and then the actions of the union on the back end to protect those teachers no matter what, right? And so, in addition to a number of different documentaries that have been out there, I think one was Waiting for Superman. I think in that they talk about basically the New York public school system and essentially the building that it has, all of the undesirable teachers that they can't fire because of the collective bargaining contracts and agreement and union protection, and how they just sit there and read the paper and magazines all day and get paid, and will get a pension at the end of the line. All of those things have contributed to eroding the confidence in the public education, the institution that is centralized public education here in the United States. COVID, man, this is one of the lone bright spots, or one of the bright spots from COVID and the pandemic. Kids went home. They weren't in these institutions, which, by the way, the majority of them, because of the Investment Acts and the Building Acts in like the 60s, the buildings are essentially look like mental hospitals. But anyway, they weren't inside these institutional buildings, and they had to do distance learning and self-taught learning. And I think it shed a light on the fact that distance and virtual and remote learning is a viable alternative. I think it also shed light on the fact that, look, certain teachers are just not worth what other teachers are in terms of their performance. They just aren't. I know for a fact that it proved itself out during COVID. Some teachers, and not many of them, but some of them, still were able to perform at a high level. A lot of them were not, because when you don't have kids in a classroom where you can essentially, be an authoritarian and tell them to sit still and not move, and if so, you give them detention or, things like that. If you don't have those kind of authoritarian, tactics at your disposal, trying to, keep a group of kids engaged and learning virtually, it is a skill. I mean, my wife works in the arena. It is a skill set. It is a very honed skill set. You can't just, I'm like, even myself being on live video most nights, I would not be good at it. Okay, I am not a good teacher when it comes to the virtual classroom environment. There is an entire skill set that comes with it. Things like TPR, which from what I can understand is essentially your hand motions. Like, you can't always just be doing this all the time, right? Like, there are legitimately hand motions that can help add to the experience of virtual learning. It is a skill set. A lot of public education teachers do not have it. And the fact that they have a lack of competitiveness in the workplace that they're in, they have no real incentive to learn it, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if they don't learn it and they're crappy as a virtual teacher, they will continue to get paid. They've already seen this. So, you show me what the reward structure is, I'll show you what kind of results come out of it. That's exactly what's going to come out of it. There's not going to be very much change on the part of those professionals, those teaching professionals, if it means that, I can still just keep my job and just not learn the new skill set, right? A number of the teachers will, because they are inspired to, and a lot of them won't. There's also been and this isn't COVID related, this is the last couple of decades, there has been a flat line in educational performance. Okay, whether you look at in terms of standardized testing, whether you look at other types of metrics in terms of graduation rates, if you look at other types of metrics in terms of just how these kids do when they go to secondary and post-secondary education, there has been a flat line in achievement. Okay, I'm probably preaching to the choir in terms of most people that are watching me, but the education system that we have is a Prussian education system that is meant to work like a factory. It is meant to create cogs That's what it does. It creates cogs. It does not help identify high flyers. It does not, raise up the lowest achievers to the middle. It legislates and teaches to that middle band of achievers, okay, which has somewhat of a negative effect on both the high flyers as well as those kids that can't keep up or, quite frankly, could care less about the standardized education topics and subjects and things like that we're forcing upon children within the centralized public education system. But educational achievement has flatlined. Meanwhile, other countries are catching up. And you know what? Like the Chinese educational model, it's like ours, just a little bit more efficient. They built a factory that's more efficient than ours is. And the difference is that they are also, it might not even be a difference. It's just they are more than willing to be forthright and upfront about the fact that they're like, look, if you're an underachiever, you're just going to fall off the back end, right? Here we pay lip service and try and dump money in to and I'm not saying that this is supposed to be the case. It doesn't have to be the case. But for us, when it comes to underachievers in centralized public education, we dump money at it to say, we're going to try and get them better. We're going to try and get them better. We fail, they fall off the back end anyway, because we do it in a very crappy way. We continue to try and just wrestle them into this factory cookie cutter type educational system. So that aspect of it has contributed to the fact that we just have flatlined educational achievement. The system itself has reached its optimal efficiency and output, and it's not going to get any better if we keep doing things the same way. So Nate's Rates comes in and says, in states that are starting to fund students, are libertarians going to offer some sort of option for homeschool learning that would be included in those? We've always wanted an exodus from public education. And you know what? That's one thing that I am whole hog in favor of. A lot of folks talk about school choice and things like that. Look, school choice is fine if you want to electively keep your kid in a centralized public education system, okay? That's fine. I have absolutely no problem with that. What I want with that is something that allows the loosening of restrictions in terms of homeschooling. I am lucky. I am in a state which is the most unbelievable thing I've ever come across my entire life. This is one of the most authoritarian, centrally planned states in the entire country, okay? It is very bad for natural rights. And yet the homeschool community enjoys a freedom that doesn't exist in any other state. In New Jersey, when you want to homeschool your kid, you just keep them home. You don't have to register. You don't have to give the state their name. You don't have to give the state their curriculum. You don't have to check in with, standardized tests that they would normally have to take if they were in school, or submit a portfolio of work or anything like that. We get to actually just teach our kids the way we want to. It is the most amazing dichotomy. I would be out of this state 10 years ago when my kids were first born if we didn't enjoy that one freedom, okay? Everything else sucks ass, all right, as far as freedom goes. That freedom is absolutely amazing. And so to Nate, to Nate's Rates, to your comment or your question, I would say every single libertarian that's out there, embrace both of these. If your kids want to stay within the centralized education system, fine. Ideally we want to get rid of all taxes and stuff like that. But as a middle ground, if the taxes persist and the residents insist that there be some kind of centrally planned option out there, allow for school choice, but at the same time advocate that parents that want to keep their kids home and homeschool them, just let them. No restrictions, no registration, no state tracking or any of this other bullshit. Let them just educate their kids the way they want to. And we'll go through some of the solutions that are out there that make this ridiculously easy, which is why centrally planned education is dead, right? Some people will say it's dying. Some people say it's on life support. Some people say it needs to be reformed. No, it's gone, dude. And I'm going to show you why, all right? So, flat achievement rates, costs are rising. Every single year. We talked about trying to get, the lower third of achievers up to the average. That is extremely expensive. We're just talking about the general cost of, labor, because, the unions continue to advocate for increases in pay and things like that, as they are inclined to do. So the average cost of, educating a child does nothing but go up in a centrally planned public education system. There are certain areas where, say, like charter schools and things like that do, take the edge off of that in terms of the cost, but still they have to deal with inflation. Inflation will continue to affect pretty much everything within our society. And so for that reason, public education will continue to get more expensive. Even with school choice options, you will get school districts to compete against each other, but I don't see public teacher unions, public worker unions, meaning teachers unions, going anywhere. And so even if those districts need to compete against each other, what you might find out is you're going to come out with a handful of like these conglomerate large districts that end up gobbling up all the other districts, and then just what will happen is we'll delay the inevitable. The teachers union will continue to wield a big stick, and then once all of that consolidation happens over a handful of years, they will then go back to this, kind of strong arm negotiation so that they can increase the money that they take in and the money that the teachers are getting paid through that collective bargaining process. All right, and we already talked about bad press. All right, so those are the reasons why confidence has eroded within the public education system, centrally planned. Now let's look at alternatives. All right, so obviously homeschool is the first one that comes to mind. So homeschooling, and these are things I'm gonna break this out into two. Right, there's homeschooling, and then there's online on-demand education. Okay, and they're not exactly like two competing alternatives. Most homeschoolers are going to use online on-demand education, okay? But the reason why I separate them out is the technological tools that I will talk about in the second topic heading can be deployed anywhere. They can be deployed at a charter school, at a private school, at a religious school, at, even in homeschool, okay? So homeschooling is kind of one basket, and then that overlaps with these technological tools that I'll talk about afterward. Homeschooling is the big one, okay? Let's talk about curriculums. There is literally hundreds of curriculums that you can purchase. Yesterday, I was looking at basically the Ron Paul Freedom Curriculum to purchase for my kids, and I really want to do it with them. Like, I am trying to carve out 3 days a week that I can be home and not working like a crazy person and do at least a couple of these courses at a time with each one of my kids, because I think they are amazingly crafted. But regardless of your persuasion, if you're liberty and freedom minded, fantastic. There's tons of those out there. Tuttle Twins, the Tuttle Twins books and learning courses are out there. I think that's John Stossel. There's tons of them that are liberty minded. There are also tons of them that are, very, kind of religious and whether it's Christian, Jewish, depending on what your religious belief system is, there are a number of them that appeal to that as well. So it's not like you're going completely unstructured if you don't want to be unstructured. If you need help with it, there is literally these curriculums that are out there that can be just kind of plug and play. You just get the curriculum and you just go step by step with your kids, and you can teach them, or you can have tutors and things like that come in and teach them, or you can do it in a group setting. And we'll talk about co-ops in a minute. All right, flexibility. That's something that has come up in spades for everyone, whether it's work, whether it's school. Because of the pandemic and being home and things like that, people are beginning to prize flexibility in everything that they do. Work, study, leisure, okay? And so that trend is coming through into education in a big way. Kids can study, in college, they can already do it. If they're taking remote classes, virtual classes, tons of their content that they go through on a daily basis or a weekly basis in college is all online. They can study on demand. If they want to study at 3 o'clock in the morning, they can, okay? And see a video of their professor or a video of the content that they're looking to basically engage with and essentially, internalize and then be able to redeploy however, project, test, whatever, all right? So that flexibility is a big piece of it, and homeschooling is literally the most flexible option that is out there right now in the educational world. And that's also in terms of flexibility of the material and the content as well, not just timing, right? So you have hundreds of curriculums that are out there. There's also these types of homeschooling, and my family engages in these ideas of unschooling, world schooling, and all kinds of other things. Unschooling be no curriculum. The kid basically dictates what they want to learn. And then it's your job as the parent or as the teacher or professor to facilitate that learning journey, right? And so you don't necessarily need a rote curriculum for that. You have to go out and, find tools and resources. And then eventually, once the kids get old enough, they then learn to go out and find the stuff themselves. It's absolutely amazing, right? So that's unschooling. There's also world schooling, all right? And to talk about, voucher programs and the cost of homeschooling versus, a traditional centralized public education system, like the costs aren't even close. You can do it for much cheaper, homeschool. And on top of that, the how cheap it is to do it homeschool, you can literally just take your kids on a trip all year long. That's how much money we spend on centralized education. For that money, you could take your kids to, Peru or, to Egypt or to, maybe not some of the more industrialized countries are a little bit more difficult to do it in if you go to France or Germany or stuff because things are more expensive. But there are tons of families that form these groups, these co-ops that do it, or you can do it individually and just travel some of these countries. Let your kids take in cultures that most of us, like literally, like 99% of us, never experience. And these parents give these kids this experience. All right, co-ops. The co-ops, and I'm going to talk about social media kind of combined, all right? There are thousands of homeschool and co-op groups that have been formed on Facebook. They have been formed in Twitter circles. They have been formed on different other social media platforms to allow, meetups and things like that have allowed folks who do want to homeschool or at the very least supplement the centralized education that their kids are getting. They are so available. It is absolutely ridiculous. Like it's for someone who's not in the world, it's tough to understand. But literally online, I can find within 50 miles or 25 miles of where I'm sitting right now, probably a half a dozen homeschool groups that are actively meeting, participating, either interacting online or interacting in person, right? And what's the big thing? Like, oh, I can't homeschool my kids because they won't be socialized. Dude, my kids will talk to anyone and they don't shut up, okay? There is no lack of socialization that comes with homeschooling. That is an old wives' tale because everyone thinks that homeschooling is associated with locking the kid in a closet with a book or something. That just doesn't happen, okay? Homeschooled kids are just as social, if not more, because the majority of them are not sitting there in a chair with an authoritarian going to, essentially put them in prison, a little child prison, if they don't, sit straight and shut up and listen all the time and don't have an opposite opinion of the teacher and things like that. Homeschool kids have socialization up the wazoo. So do not even buy into that old trope. It's complete crap. But co-ops are completely viable and available. What's fantastic is if you're a working parent, you can be a part of a co-op, and that co-op will allow you to, the kids can participate in it full time, and your time commitment, because the, co-op is going to pool the resources of all the parents, maybe you only have to commit a day and a half to it. And so you could still work full time and have the kids participate in a co-op. Right? Most people would say, oh, well, the inner city kids, where will they go? They, poor kids, they can't afford this kind of thing. You don't need money to sit in a circle and have a parent teach kids things. You just don't. Okay? Parents have certain skill sets. We all have different skill sets. Okay? Parents can sit in a circle with kids and teach them that skill set. And that is a viable subject or medium or information for those kids to get experience with and to be, interested in, or maybe they're not interested in. But you know what? They get the experience of it, and they get to learn what they are or aren't interested in. But there is absolutely nothing that says that kids, here's the other trope that comes with it. Well, parents aren't trained teachers. Have you seriously not taught your kids anything ever? Have you not ever taught your kids anything? My kids, We teach them things. They are pains in the butt sometimes. Actually, they're pains in the butt a lot because they take after me and they have my stubbornness and temperament, okay? But that being said, to say that you've never taught your kids something and you have to be a trained teacher to do it is completely ridiculous. The other thing that goes with that is the assumption is that a parent would have to teach the same way a teacher teaches in centralized Prussian factory education. That's ridiculous. You don't need to teach that way. There's all kinds of people that teach classes that don't look anything like a traditional teacher, and they are just as effective, if not better. Okay? My brother says, I went from failing in public school to a 4+ GPA and then to salutatorian of my bachelor's class all within 5 years. Public school is geared towards churning out community pawns that feed the grinder. It is public indoctrination, state-funded indoctrination camps. They want to churn out cogs. My brother Bryce went to a virtual learning environment before it was in vogue. He had to go to Washington State. We live in New Jersey. He had to go to Washington State for his actual graduation from high school. Okay? Never met his classmates in person until he went there. And guess what? They had a good time. They had a fantastic time. But we got to worry about socialization and attainment of achievement. He's a living example of the fact that you do not need centralized education to have a high level of achievement. In fact, I would say that you can get a high level of achievement and just in some area that centralized education isn't tracking or doesn't prize, right? The emergence of technical schools is part of that evolution where centralized education could not accurately help kids that were more technically inclined and didn't do well with book learning, okay? Those kids were usually the ones that were the dropouts and that then had to go get educated somewhere else afterward. Well, guess what? That shit still happens. There are still kids that drop out, okay? Not to mention the fact that with the abundance of things that are available for kids nowadays, there's absolutely no reason why they have to go to a centralized government location in order to get educated, find information, and learn things, all right? So that's co-ops. Social media has made it extremely easy to coordinate co-ops. Which, by the way, there are a lot of other countries that don't have nearly as large and built out a central education system as we do, and they still give good they give good results on the back end because there's a lot of experiential learning. There's still a lot of trade skilling and apprenticeship and stuff like that that's alive in those countries. You do not need to sit in some ivory tower looking school in order to learn and have a high level of achievement. All right, so I said the second kind of pot of things I was going to talk about was online and on-demand education resources. So you could follow curriculum, books, coloring books, textbooks, things like that, okay? But quite frankly, kids learn better with multimedia, okay? Video, written, audible, experiential, hands-on stuff. Like, they need a mix. Kids are curious. Kids are creative. Not all kids learn the same. Something that I learned in college. I was lucky. When I went to college, my professors in a technical school, biomedical engineering, very technical program, one of the things that they studied the most was how kids learn. Most of my classes had one test at most, okay? The rest of it was in-class small projects, large projects, deliverables, and group learning, okay? If you can teach the stuff yourself, you know it well enough, right? If you can teach others, all right? That was something that my professors hammered into us, and I take that with me to this very day, more so than any of the math, any of the engineering, any of the technical knowledge that I learned. That was way more important because I understand how people learn differently. Some people learn through sight, some people learn through hearing, some people actually have to physically touch something, and we're all different. So online and on-demand education. There are all of these different offerings that aren't just new. They didn't just come onto the scene recently. Okay? The offerings that are out there, all right, this is like a family affair. My mother's online and she's saying, I was a big pain in the ass. Yes, I was a big pain in the ass. And my children are evidence of that because they are half me and they are also a big pain in the ass sometimes. So, no, that is completely truthful. But, so anyway, back to the online and on-demand education. There are all of these offerings that are out there that not just fill the gap of taking the place of centralized public education, they actually kick its ass. Okay? And I'm going to say that without any hesitation. Kick its ass. All right? The one I'm going to talk to you about first is the one that we use the most, and it's called OutSchool. And OutSchool is essentially a collective of virtual educators like my wife and people from all kinds of different walks of life, all right, that teach a gigantic, wide variety of courses, all right? Now, there aren't any like specific curriculum. You get to pick and choose. So as a student or as a parent, you get to say, like, I want a little of that, I want a little of that, I want a little of that. Some of it's creative, some of it's more life skills, and a lot of it is traditional, math, science, reading, writing, arithmetic, like all of the basics, okay, with all of the awesome stuff too. Art, drama, music, everything, okay? OutSchool. Beast Academy. Beast Academy is essentially one of tons of software programs that are out there that are cloud-based that your kids can basically dive into to learn one subject in depth, okay? And so it is set up, Beast Academy is, I think, mostly for math. They might have some other modules that are there. My kids use it for math. They can learn as little or as much as they want in one sitting. And here's the other critique I will give of centralized public education. The idea that it doesn't allow kids to just ingest information in one arena as much as they can for as long as they can. It always spreads them out. It's always like you have to learn a little bit of history, a little bit of science, a little bit of math, okay, all at the same time. Well, what if your kid just has a propensity for math and science? Just let them do that. They don't need to learn literature or history or home ec or anything like that. If they are willing to just sit down and do math and science all day long, let them. Let the kid be 10 and have a junior or senior in high school's aptitude in math and science, if they are that good with it. Who cares if they don't take a literature course or a history course? If they can be that amazing in that one arena, let them. Let them. But they're limited because only a couple of teachers might be required to get them to that level of attainment. But it takes more teachers, more salaries, and more money going to the union to spread them out into 8 different subjects every single day. The structure screws them. Beast Academy is absolutely fantastic. It is a great option that's out there. I do not make any money off of any of this. If you go to one of these places, it is your choice to use these resources if you choose to use them as a parent. I don't make any money, any kickback. I am telling you, I have had a good experience. I cannot guarantee you that you are going to have a great experience with it. You have to pick the provider that works best for you. I'm going to talk about some generalized things, okay? The gamification of learning is a big deal, okay? And some of it takes the form of video games, some of it takes the form of other things like puzzles and board game type things and card games and stuff like that. But learning is becoming to be gamified, right? Like, you don't have to sit there and go brain dead learning a subject, especially if maybe it's one that you're not like insanely happy about learning, okay? If you can turn it into a game, it sticks better. There is gamification that is happening everywhere in the learning arena, okay? So much so that you see a lot of these things trickle into public education, but they're not adopted to the same level that they would be if those students were out in the free market adopting these things to the level that they want to adopt them to, right? There's always gatekeepers. And the gatekeepers are not going to allow a student to like completely do a gamified curriculum. They won't. But that kid might thrive doing it, right? But the teacher doesn't want to teach that way. The other dynamic here is that Centralized public education does a very poor job of tailoring curriculum and learning to the individual. If you notice, a lot of the things I'm talking about are on the individual level, because when you put kids into a collective class, now you have to legislate or teach to the mean. You can't legislate or teach to the individual. And that's also a gigantic problem of public education. These options allow you to create an individualized experience in the educational realm. Individualized, not just this blanket kind of edict for all of these kids to follow. All right, there's a couple of other ones out there that are more akin to like traditional school learning, but they are virtual classroom type offerings, or virtual, basically like modules that you sit there and watch a video and do something online with, okay? One is called Varsity Tutors. One is called, that's the big one. A lot of their courses, I think most, if not all, are actually free. What? They are free. There are also tons of, this is also something that has been happening. There are tons of free courses that are also being offered by colleges. Colleges are offering free courses. Some of them are on the college level. Some of them are actually, lower level, more remedial courses that your kids can take. And a lot of them are for free. And then the other one I'll talk about is Wander School. Wander School is in the vein of this world schooling idea. Wander, like to wander, means schooling that happens by traveling and going places experientially, okay? And you learn history and culture and food and language and even some science and mythology and math and all kinds of other stuff, right? Wander School, all right? So those are all and that's not even the tip of the iceberg. There's literally like hundreds and thousands upon offerings in this arena. That's why centrally planned education is dead. All you have to do is just be willing to make the jump. It's there waiting for you. It's not like you're making the jump into the unknown and no net is there. This isn't just a net. This is like a wealth of opportunity. There's so much that you'll be like, holy crap, where do I start? And the answer is just pick one. See what your kids like. Just give them a taste. Let them see if they like it. If you don't, move on to something else. Okay? Individualized education. All right. The last thing I'm going to talk about is industry trends. And this is something that is going to be even more powerful than anything they try and do in the public education system. The direct result of what your kids end up learning is what they do later on in life, right? Their job, their vocation, their home life, everything like that. What they learn is supposed to set them up to be a successful adult. Okay? That's it, right? You want them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, pursue what they want to pursue, and be able to do that successfully. All right? It is not to be a, quote unquote, productive member of society. As soon as you fall into that, let's make them a productive member of society thing, you might as well just put on a freaking commie hat and wear red all day long and then march them off to the gulag if they decide to do something different. That is a socialist or collectivist mentality. Do not fall into that. You want them to be able to pursue what they want to pursue and be able to do it successfully, okay? That's what you want. So, industry trends. Tech companies hire high school grads now. They don't wait for them to graduate from college. They don't want all of the bad habits from going to college. They actually take them right out of high school now. That means that younger and younger kids are being identified for, more specific tracks of learning. All right? And it's for that very example. Like if your kid is tech savvy and he or she is 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, there's no reason that by the time they're 17 or 18, they can't have essentially what is today's adults' knowledge of technology so that they can go join a tech firm. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do that if you just give them the opportunity to run with the ball in that direction, okay? Tech companies are hiring high school grads. They will train them in addition to whatever they've had. They will train them their way. They'll create their own university. so that they can learn technology that way. A number of other companies are no longer requesting, or requiring as a hard requirement that you have a college diploma. They're looking at things like portfolio of work, work experience, internships, designations and credentials that you can get that don't require you to go to a 4-year university. I could also do this episode about college. Traditional college is dead too. It still doesn't know it. There's a few select arenas that it makes sense to go to a traditional college nowadays. Okay, all the rest of them doesn't make any sense. If you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be an architect, okay, those folks still probably have to go to a four-year university because there's, research equipment and all kinds of things that require a ridiculous amount of money pooled together in order to get those resources, okay? Everything outside of that, literature degree, history degree, even some of the basic physical sciences and stuff like that, there is no need to go to 4-year university anymore. And it is evidenced by the fact that these tech companies are not hiring, or they're actively looking now to hire kids from high school, not from college. Colleges are ditching standardized tests as a metric to let people in. Standardized tests are not a judge of IQ. They're a judge of your ability to essentially memorize information and regurgitate it on a test. That's what a robot does, okay? That doesn't necessarily test critical thinking or application or adaptability or ingenuity, right? Universities more and more are ditching standardized tests, again, with a few exceptions, okay? There are still certain grad schools, law schools, and things like that are going to require you to take a certain type of, standardized test to make sure that you have a baseline of knowledge to be able to go into that specialized field, that specialized profession. But in terms of just going to college, a lot of them don't require standardized tests anymore. Colleges are also actively seeking out homeschool kids. Actively. Why? Those kids think different. They're not automatons. They're not robots. They look at the world differently, right? Their curiosity and their ingenuity it's off the charts because in a lot of cases, those homeschool kids are not taught the neat little box they're supposed to fit into. If you tell some kid who comes through centralized education that, try and be inventive, okay? Whatever place they are in the box, they'll pick somewhere else in the box. A homeschool kid who doesn't think of themselves in that box, who thinks literally anything is possible, will pick something way out there. And that's where amazing innovation happens, not incremental change. Universities are looking to actively recruit homeschool kids. Entrepreneurship, the great equalizer. In self-defense, firearms are the great equalizer. In terms of socioeconomic status, entrepreneurship is the great equalizer. If you are an individual that has the fortitude and the desire to create a business from the ground up and bust your rear end, there is no greater boon to your personal socioeconomic status than being able to create and run a successful business of your own, for-profit venture, okay? Now, we have an economic system right now and a regulatory system that craps on the ability for people to do that. And yet, people still do it. That's how amazing individuals are, specifically entrepreneurs. Adapt and overcome. They are masters of adapting and overcoming headwinds and trials and tribulations. They have grit in spades. They have so much grit. Entrepreneurs are amazing. And it is the great equalizer. You want to help folks that are, in the lower third of income and socioeconomic status in this country. Education and things like that, whatever, they're all nice and well and good and everything like that. Empower them to run a business. Hands down. Within 2 generations, that family will be out of poverty. First generation will be the matriarch or patriarch that starts the business. The second generation will be the kids that end up taking over that business, growing it, and they're out. They're done. Life is way better. And you're also your own master. You don't have to, kneel down to the state to help with income and the basics of living and things like that. Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is also something that is growing across the board because of technology, and this includes kids. You see kids more and more now that are high school age or younger creating businesses, viable, profitable, growing businesses, because the technology is so readily accessible and because they are literally born with it in their hands. These kids are able to run businesses from a very young age. And I'll tell you what, there is no better learning experience than running a business. You don't have to have all the answers. In fact, the vast majority of successful entrepreneurs don't have all the answers. They find them out as they go. Entrepreneurship is a gigantic opportunity for young kids. You don't need centralized education to learn entrepreneurship. All you need is curiosity. That's it. That's all you need. Here's the last thing. Zoomers, Gen Z. They are less likely to take out student loans. They actually slant conservative economically because they've seen the disaster that is the predatory student lending environment and industry that we have in this country, fueled by subsidized lending, basically reckless lending without any regard to the creditworthiness of the individual, which results in debt slaves in this country. Gen Z Zoomers do not want to fall into that trap. Many of them will do anything they can to either get an education or a job or start a company without going into debt. And that is admirable. That is something that we should be encouraging. That is smart. And these kids, they don't require centralized education to be able to fulfill those goals. Many of them are willing to go it on their own and blaze a new path, as long as they don't have to go into debt to do it. That is incredible. That is an overall trend within that generation that I hope grows with the generation that comes after. Because that is one of the most liberty things that I can think of from a young generation. Entrepreneurship and not wanting to be able to be saddled with, not being saddled with debt for the rest of your life, which, by the way, cannot be disposed of. Bryce saying he's a licensed mixologist, a bartender. I'd like to point out there's either too much or not enough ice in your bourbon glass. It's been sitting here for a little while, so that's probably what the problem is. And so I'm hydrating at the same time I'm drinking. But that being said, for all of those reasons are why centrally planned education is it's not like on its last legs. It still exists as this dinosaur, this vestige of the past, right? Like this kind of edifice to what used to exist in this country in the 50s and 60s. And that's the only reason why it's there. And it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. And it does sound radical to say, well, we can go without it. And everyone will say, oh, well, what'll happen? Like we've had, flatlining achievement. Will achievement go down? No. People, have faith in people and children. Have faith. They are naturally curious. They are naturally explorers and want to learn and figure out new things and new ways to do things that everyone else has done different ways in the past. They will be successful. And I would expect that they would be not just a little more successful than previous generations that went through centrally planned education. I would expect them to be much more, like orders of magnitude more successful. Because if you remember the example of the homeschooler who doesn't even know that they're inside of that box, these kids will come up with ideas and businesses and innovation and basically inventions and techniques and information that no one ever thought was possible, because they won't be afraid to go outside of some arbitrarily defined cultural, box of thought that gets placed on them within a school. within a centrally planned school. Now, does it mean that we need to tear every single school down tomorrow? No, I think that would be a gigantic shock to the system. Does it mean that in pretty quick order we should do it, like, in the span of a few years? Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly the way to go. And to the people that'll say, well, what about all the jobs? What about the teachers that will be displaced? Well, they will have to, learn how to teach in this new environment. A number of them already have. They did it with COVID. Okay? They had to learn the skills of a virtual teacher, which are different than the skills of a teacher that is working in person in a centrally planned educational system, in an institution like our public schools. They'll learn. They will be able to exist outside of it. They just need the impetus and the lack of the, just institutional kind of structure that keeps them in a constant state of just, complacency is basically what is not necessarily rewarded, but it's not punished. I mean, it's not like there's no negative consequence that comes from being complacent. In fact, a lot of those people get advanced because they don't make any problems. They just kind of go along to get along. But that's not the educational system that we need. Not with other countries that are making huge advances in terms of how they're educating their children. We owe it to this generation and every generation afterward to put centralized education behind us. It did its job for 30 or 40 years. It got everyone from here to here, but it has reached its limit. It is now time to embrace a system that is, 1, decentralized, 2, a free market and competitive, and 3, allows for just ridiculously higher achievement, that allows kids and parents to be masters of their own destiny in terms of their learning and what direction they ultimately go in. I'll end this episode with one observation, and this is something that gets kicked around, and it has never been more evident than it was during COVID. A lot of people in the liberty community, libertarians, anarchists, Ron Paul Republicans, they will call schools prisons. And a lot of people would say, well, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Schools are institutions of learning and knowledge. They're not prisons. Well, here in New Jersey and a couple of other states, I have direct firsthand knowledge of people whose children were in a classroom after the school was reopened, but the teacher was at home teaching the kids in their classroom virtually. And the kids were being watched by not a teacher, not a teacher's aide, not a custodian or a principal or anything like that. They were being watched by the security guards in the school. That was the adult that was in the room on a day-to-day basis. So there were kids sitting, not chained to desks, which would have been like, way over the top, but, figuratively chained to desks, socially distanced apart, in a room with a teacher on a TV who should have been in the room, but wasn't, because the union was afraid that that teacher was at risk. Meanwhile, all the rest of the kids are there. So, it's all about the kids. And the adult in the room was a security guard. The trope became reality. It was never more evident that at that point in time, and from here on out, and even prior, school is a prison. Centralized public education is effectively a prison, and it was completely confirmed in this case during COVID. And I can't explain how happy I am that people are waking up to the fact that a centralized, centrally planned educational system doesn't benefit any individual. It is there for the collective. It is there for the, all of those little cogs that they want to spit out the back end. That's what it's there for. It's not there for the individual student, and it's not there for exemplary performance. It's there for, let's make everyone equal, which means let's make everyone average. And that's essentially what it does. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Reminder, if you made it this far, if you're watching the video, if you're live, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, get it out there. Like I said, follow me on everywhere that I am, but specifically go to my link tree and check me out on blockchain, because tomorrow night I'm going to be talking about building community, specifically communities that are built on liberty, changing the culture as a result of it, and part of that is gathering in places that pride ourselves on liberty and decentralized, lack of centralized control and true freedom. And part of where that is happening is on the blockchain. So definitely follow me on the blockchain if you haven't already. Check out my video where I go through actually opening up an account on the Hive blockchain. And in fact, that was the longer version. Right now, I'm going to try and get someone on from Leo Finance, but Leo Finance, Leo Finance.io, actually has a streamlined account creation process on the Hive blockchain. So definitely check them out. Go over to leofinance.io, use their sign up option, and get on the Hive blockchain to find your way around, meet some people. I think you'll find it extremely interesting because it is a completely different place than Web 2.0 and the traditional social media apps and world that is out there. So definitely check it out. I look forward to seeing you on Hive, and I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow night. Thank you very much.